Hey.
Okay, good evening.
Hello, everybody. We are so glad you're joining us today on Thursday PD. We are glad to be back. I know I am, and we have a wonderful show for you today. Hope that you guys can go ahead and start by telling us who you are and where you're from in the chat. Today, we're going to be talking all things 21st century skill, and we're going to really kind of be talking about those skills and how they add to our own experiences with our students, as well as where we want our students to kind of go in the future. So 21st Century Skills is the name of the game, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in with introductions. You want to start us off, James?
Yeah, I'm James Sabella, and 21st century skills ought to be something I'm familiar with because I've done my fair share of those 21st century learning workshops recently. So, but yeah, I mean, I think there are skills since the arrival of the internet that we should be focused on. Unsurprisingly, computer science, but that's next month, so I promise not to talk about it this month.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell them where you're tuning in from and what you do in education, and then we'll pass it on over to Gary. James?
Okay, so I'm from Kuala Lumpur, and I'm a computer science teacher.
Awesome. Gary, why don't you share where you're from and what you do in education?
Oh, it's my turn now.
It is.
Yeah, sorry. Gary Garcia here from the Philippines. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I'm Gary Garcia from the Philippines. I'm a senior high school computer ed teacher and a trainer for Google, and that's it.
Awesome.
So
Wonderful.
good evening, everyone. Good evening.
That is not just it. So just for all the viewers, right, that are watching, everybody around me is superstars, right? Google innovators, Google trainers, ed tech coaches, changing the world of education in their own time zone. So it's never just it, and they're taking their free time to join you guys today to share all about things that they're doing in their ecosystems to help reshape education positively and engagingly. So it's never just it, Gary, okay?
Okay.
Smackdown coming from Georgina, and could you share a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Absolutely. So greetings from Jordan in the Middle East. I'm like, I want to say in the middle of Shannon and Gary and James's time zone, but it's not quite in the middle, but somewhere near there anyway. So yeah, working in at a K-12 nonprofit international school as director of learning technology, and a few googly things, a few Adobe things, and all the rest is history. The name of the game is education.
That is right. And I am Shannon Moore, coming at you from California, high school English and speech teacher, technology coach, googly things, Adobe things, life, and really passionate about education. And honestly, these days, I feel like the name of the game is also transformation. And so hopefully we can kind of dialogue today about, initially when you hear the term 21st century skills, what does that mean to you? And then ultimately we'll kind of work through some of them and maybe see how they are kind of being carried out in our own spaces to kind of lead the way for that transformation. So James kind of kicked us off and gave us some insight when he hears the word 21st century skills. So I'm going to pass it back over to Georgina. Georgina, when you hear that phrase, what kind of thoughts, feelings, emotions are tied to it for you?
Oh, so many. We don't have enough time in this 60-minute segment, let me tell you. Okay. Basically, the bottom line is that we have just transitioned through and are still transitioning through what I would like to say is the most epic transformation in my history of education, which isn't very long on the planet, but hopefully a few more years left in me. And when we think about where we're going, we have to consider what is next for the world, what is next for these students that are going to be graduating from our ecosystems, and how can we help them be successful in their pathway to wherever they're going. So I'm sure it's not news to anybody on the channel and watching and viewing with us today. Thank you for joining. That the jobs that are going to exist are going to be different because we have some pretty big SDGs that need solving, right, guys? Some pretty big problems in the world. So the skills that are going to be needed to get working and collaborating and thinking critically on those problems and getting them solved or on their way to getting solved are going to require very important skills. And we need to make sure that those skills are what we are harnessing, what we are building, developing, and supporting across education. So I'll leave it to somebody else to get started into what those might be, and you can loop back around to me at the end.
Yeah, I love it. Gary, do you want to kick us off by maybe thinking through your view of 21st century skills and maybe highlighting some that you find are, I mean, they're all important, but the ones that maybe you use more often in your own practice?
Yeah. So when you say 21st century skills, it's basically, I have started educating my students with the tools. So it's the first one is the tools, because before we used to take down notes using pen and paper, and now we used to take down notes using pen and paper, plus we have the tools, and then we collaborate. With the teachers, it's more challenging with the teachers because there are tenured teachers who are not really scared, but hesitant about the changes that they have to do, especially with our setup now. So 21st century means for me is embracing the change, and keep on learning. So there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of things that we should do and adjust. It's even the curriculum. Now let's welcome Ceti here. Ceti, good evening.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Ceti. How are you?
Good. It's great to see you all again.
Wonderful to see you as well. Yeah, so to our audience, it's been a while since we've all been here, and it's wonderful that we can come together and chat about 21st century skills. Ceti, why don't you start off by just kind of telling everybody where you're joining in from, what you do in education, and when you hear the term phrase 21st century skills, what kind of feelings, thoughts, emotions kind of are tied to that?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand. Work at an international school. In the most recent years, I've been doing a lot of STEAM training. So I'm working with our teachers to get them familiar with all the different things we have available in our design labs, in our makerspace. I also work with our students in the makerspace and design lab, and then also do a lot of computer science with them. So we're trying to combine all those different subjects together. And then aside from that, I really enjoy looking at educational technology in general, and do a lot of staff training. So yeah, 21st century, when I hear those skills, it's just, yeah, I love hearing about it because it's ingrained in everything I try to do with our students. So excited.
Yeah. Great. So let's say good evening to those who are watching from the Philippines. We have plenty. Thank you so much for tuning in, Filipinos.
Love it. All right, we're gonna toss it over to James, and let's hear what you have to say. What are some thoughts?
So I just want to share my screen for a second. Hang on, Chrome tab should do it. So I think one of the most important things as a computer science teacher is this critical thinking and problem solving. And with computers, we can solve problems we could never have solved. But also, it's all about this communication, digital literacy, and social responsibility. So I think there's huge amounts to think about. But the key thing for me is memory isn't the thing. We have Google, we have an internet, so our impact can be much bigger. But also, the way we learn hopefully will change soonish. At the moment, education is really anchored around these exams, and that's not really the way things work in the real world. And so I think it's so important that, yes, we have to pass exams, but think about students' portfolios. How are they going to prepare themselves for the real world? Because, yes, there are deadlines, but these are not deadlines where you can't use Google. These aren't deadlines where you're stuck on your own, or you couldn't phone somebody or phone a friend or anything like that. So I think that's really important. And just for me, that's it. It's all about teamwork, communication, problem solving, and trying to set students up and children up to keep on doing it. And most important, it's a rapid change. So lifelong learning is so important. And those people that are prepared to do these things and bring these skills are going to have really bright futures. There are many, many jobs being created, but they require those kind of computational thinking skills, programming skills, and to be more human. So that's my thought.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great shares. You kind of mentioned, and it's going to direct the conversation. You mentioned this idea that, you know, education needs to kind of evolve, and right now it's kind of centered around these ideas of exams and testing and all these things. So I'm gonna pose this question to the panel. Do you think schools are fostering 21st century skills? And obviously we're talking in generalities here, but maybe if your own space is, could you maybe give some examples? We'll go ahead and start with Georgina.
We always start with me. That's okay. All right. So what I think we've seen it across the board, right? That educators right now are trying to adapt to online learning, hybrid learning, etc. So I think that in and of itself is trying to adapt and change and grow. The question is going to be, how do we take those skills then? How do we mix it with what has worked well traditionally, which may definitely not be exams, so James is right there, but whatever has been working traditionally, like those amazing activities of collaboration face-to-face in the classroom, the important pieces, how do we mix all that together and then redefine what that landscape looks like? So do I think that some schools are doing it? Absolutely. Look at the classrooms for all the education leaders on this call right now. I would guarantee that those skills are happening in the classrooms here, and also from a lot of classrooms of the viewers that are watching on the call, right? So the question is, what's left and where do we take it from here? Do we have a long way to go? I think so, but have we made a massive kickstart in the right direction because of COVID? Absolutely. That's what I think.
For sure. And I think you're right. I think that COVID has, in a lot of ways, disrupted education in both a good and a bad way, right? And so if we could ride that wave, I think we do have an opportunity. A lot of schools have an opportunity to continue to foster those skills. Let's hear from Ceti. What do you think? In your own experience, do you feel like schools are doing enough to foster those 21st century skills and prepare students for the future?
I think many schools definitely are, and they're working hard at trying to really combine sort of the expectations that are coming down from government bodies, the expectations from parents, and then what they believe is best when it comes to pedagogy. And so they're having to merge all of that into how a school is run and how lessons are fed. And sometimes that's where you see teachers sort of bumping up against things that they know really aren't ideal, but it's still happening. And what I've been incredibly impressed with is just how hardworking and motivated teachers have been, and how much of their passion they are just pouring into their subjects, trying to get these 21st century skills into lessons that sadly they are having to teach often, that are not necessarily, you know, allowing them to have all of these elements that we're talking about, but they're still just using that passion to try and bring these elements into those lessons. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to see, that you just see all these driven educators on Twitter, on Facebook, just look at the audience we have here, just sharing ideas, talking about assessment, and again challenging that status quo, challenging it and saying, look, what are we doing and how can we improve it? There are schools being, you know, started around the world that are trying to challenge it. And again, okay, it's often the private sector, it's the more wealthier areas that are sort of really able to push that. I mean, you see some startup schools in various areas around the world. But seeing that makes me hopeful, because it shows that there is a market for it, and that market is growing and people are understanding it more. It makes me think of what happened today, because we had a short little guided reading session with a year 5 student, and he was reading and there was a word he didn't understand. I was like, do you know what that means? He says, no, I don't, but it's okay, I can right click it and click on define. And I was like, there you go. Like if you expose them to these sort of, ways of dealing with problems, like what James was saying, it's no longer about memory. It's there, make it available, and don't block it. Don't tell them they're not allowed to use it. Like, why would you do that in the work field? I mean, if I don't know the answer, the first thing I do is I Google it.
Yes.
And I'm not just going to sit there and just admit to myself that, I can't do this and I'll never be able to do it. No, just Google it. Use what's available. People used to go to the library, they still do, but I mean, people went to libraries to find the answer to a question. Well, now they have the entire library on their computer available to them. So it's just, I love that. I love seeing that. Sorry, I'm rambling, but it actually made me think of another thing as well. I saw a comment a while ago here. Let me just see if I can find it, where it was talking about, it's all about learning things, unlearning, relearning, being willing to adapt, adjust. And then that made me think of Sundar Pichai's tweet from today, actually, where he said, we're making a big change. The future of work at Google is flexible. We're letting people choose. We're going to let them choose how they spend their time. We're going to let them choose where they work. We're going to let them choose if they want to travel the world and visit different offices. I think it's just such a beautiful thing. And that is where I do think COVID has kickstarted that. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now.
No, that's fantastic. And I think, there's a lot of comments coming through the chat like that, talking about, changing mindsets and really kind of retooling the way that we're approaching both the activities in class, but also, the assessments. Assessments are a big one. And you mentioned a couple of the skills that most people will qualify as 21st. Flexibility, like Nate said in the chat, problem solving, everything you just described with that, anecdote about your student, like that is problem solving in and of itself. And I think sometimes when we think of 21st century skills, a lot of the time we get stuck on, creativity and collaboration and communication. And I think that those aspects are so essential. But I want to kind of shift just a little bit to those more like what people term as soft skills, flexibility, leadership, curiosity, maybe something like initiative, right? How are we, or what would your advice be to educators that are listening as to how to integrate that and kind of parallel and bring those into the lessons with the content they're also charged to teach?
I'm going to be quite contrarian on this one and say that actually the best way to do teamwork is low stakes, and to not assess people based on team performance. If you're then going to put people in an exam where they're going to be individual. I think the opportunities for teamwork and for play and for those kind of things are so important, but what you want to do is in low stakes, and don't give it, because what happens when they get to secondary is that one kid does all the work because they want the results. And so you've got to create team tasks that require people to work together and to do that, because they're not old enough yet to have specialist skills. And that's what make the best teams work, is that everybody has a specialist skill. Gary and I work as an excellent team because Gary was feeding the chat, he was doing his specialist skills, and I was talking and doing things. And so the pair of us worked really well as a team, but we both brought our skills to it. And I think that is something that at school, they're not quite mature enough to handle unless you actually design the task very carefully.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Fair point. I could see that, absolutely. And teamwork is obviously a very important skill. I think that, you have to learn how to feed off of other individuals. You can't just kind of forge forward with your own perspective. And I think a lot of the time students have that singular mindset, and it's sometimes hard to break. But I'm curious though, do you think the deliberate teaching of things like flexibility and initiative and elements like that, do you think that has a place in all levels, and how would you go about it? Gary, you're nodding. You want to go ahead and start us?
Yes, because it's so important now that we teach these things, including empathy, so they can understand more how, we have we came from different backgrounds. We have different cultures. Now it's important that we empathize with others. We need to be, accepting of others' idea. So we have to be, the things that you said are can be integrated in any subject, and it can be practiced in any situation. So that's it.
I'll add on to that. I think that empathy is more important than ever. And being all of us international educators, I think we bring a unique spin to this whole world of education. And I can't tell you how many times I've read things on in spaces on the internet, on Twitter, other creative spaces where people have said XYZ about a certain part of the world. And I thought, well, actually, no, it's not like that over here in the Middle East. And maybe it's not like that in Gary's country. And maybe it's not like that where Shannon is, and I think that we really do need to understand more by not just looking on Google, although we all love Google, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Google, as you all know, but we have to talk to people who are over there. We need to step into their shoes and understand where they're coming from. So I'll take the opportunity to shout out our good friend Naomi, who's actually in Ceti's part of the world. Isn't she, Ceti? Or no, Singapore? Where is she?
She's in Japan.
Do you know? Japan. Okay, so I didn't get the country right. However, Naomi's doing a really brilliant project called Empathetic Educators. So we'll drop that into the link, into the chat for you guys. And she is connecting people from all over the world all the time. She has a blog, she does a live stream, and the work she's doing to help education communities globally understand by being in others' shoes, looking at the work that they're doing. Like even just when I had the opportunity to join this Thursday PD crew, thanks to Gary's lovely invite a year ago, look how much I've grown and learned from all of you amazing superstars and understanding more about the culture in Asia, since I've actually never visited Asia, right? So I think that it's really, really important. So just to loop back to your question, Shannon, about the importance of teaching, initiative and curiosity and flexibility and adaptability, I actually wrote a blog article a while ago on EdTech agility, and it is a skill across not just education technology, but across the way we interact as human beings with each other. These are essential skills that will also be needed as we start to interact with automation and artificial intelligence. It is not going to be just this is us and this is them. This is where I live, and so this is the bubble and the world that I need to exist and learn in. No, as James said, we need to be lifelong learners, and it's not just learning content, it's learning the skills. So I do agree. I agree with a bit of everybody, but what I think is that we need to be able to be digital citizens, just human citizens of the world. And that's going to include interacting with a multitude of points, personalities, characteristics, and tools. So those skills is what's going to help us bridge the gap and the fear between all of it. I really think it's really important that we allow risk-taking and encourage more risk-taking. I listened to, I don't remember if I listened to a session or a book. I listened to a lot of content, but like this weekend, and they were talking about the fact that, I think it was the book Abundance that I just recently read. And the author was talking about the fact that as we close the gap between the Western world and the rest of the world, we're actually also decreasing things like confidence and decreasing things like risk-taking. And so when was the last time you felt confident to do X, Y, Z, right? Because everybody's always watching. So with the World Wide Web comes spaces where we are also more aware. And does that take away from our vulnerability? So there's a lot to chunk into what I said. But I do think that if we want to help support our learners that are going to be graduating, and a lot of us support educators in our communities as well, those are the things that we need to harness on. Not necessarily just can we search on the web, but why would we want to search on the web? And are we looking in different places for the answer, or are we just looking locally? I know Nate's in the chat and he talked about social justice and awareness and that whole idea of empathy. So I'll pass the mic. I could talk about this for hours. Sorry, guys, go ahead.
No, I think it's great. And you mentioned this idea of I'm going to go to a couple of points that you talked about, global awareness and the beauty that exists in that space, right? And the fact that we do have the internet and ed tech tools that allow for that to happen. And honestly, I mean, we've had this conversation multiple times. Like a lot of the time, let's say a year ago, was so unaware of what was happening around the world because I lived in my own bubble. And the consequence of that is that now the students that I'm teaching, the 100+ students I teach every single year, are going to live in their little bubble because I'm not broadening it at all. It's not been a thing that has been important or on the forefront of my own mind. But as I've kind of met all of you, learned from all of you, it becomes much more commonplace in my own practice with my students. And you have things like tools like Flipgrid, where you can do, grid pals and students can talk to each other across the globe. And I think if we're talking about empathy, global awareness and all of that is going to come into play, right? Because we need to understand that although our world is vast, for so many students, their world is so limited. And if we can broaden that quite a bit, it's going to create these individuals who grow up and they are more empathetic and they are more compassionate because they realize that their little world isn't the most important one. The other thing that I really wanted to touch on was this idea of, you kind of mentioned in a roundabout way, this idea of curiosity. And you put an awesome article that will drop, and maybe Gary can put it in the chat, about strategies to promote curiosity in learning. And I think that curiosity, a lot of the time, we need to really think about the definition of it. I think some people think, oh, I'm curious, but it's so much more than that, right? It's this idea of being open-minded and really using questions to guide kind of the way that we interact with the content, with others, with the world around us. And I feel like that is a skill that is so often overlooked. What do you guys think?
It is, and I know that quite a few of you teach IB, and this idea of essential questions to promote curiosity, to get students to think deeply, I think is really important and so useful across the things. It's also really, really hard to come up with an actual essential question, something that really inspires that curiosity. And it took me a long time to realize the essential question is not there for assessment. It is there to actually motivate and to really encourage. Ceti, what did you?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that is being said here. I think it's beautiful to hear that everyone is talking about these different areas, and curiosity is just something that, I mean, it's one of those things that we all talk about wanting to see it in our students, and we all talk about it being important, but then we don't always implement it, and we don't apply it, and we often even stop it from happening or taking place in our classrooms. And then I think that the more we're aware of that we are making those sort of, that we're sometimes stopping, like I saw another mention to sort of that design thinking approach to things, the more we are aware of what that design thinking cycle looks like, the more we can stop ourselves from stopping that from happening. So when something goes wrong, don't just give them the answer. Don't just tell them, no, this is how you do it. And then we're quick to do that. We do that as parents, we do that as teachers, and because time's always there. And then the more we let go of that and we promote that curiosity, like, oh yeah, that didn't quite work. I wonder why. And it's little things like that. And it's almost, we need to become more like early years teachers with our secondary students to continuously promote that curiosity. Because I don't know if you've ever visited an early years class, but any early years practitioner, they are just constantly using the right type of questioning, the right type of, everything they say and do is what we are talking about right now. But then thinking of secondary students, like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, well, maybe every secondary teacher should just spend a month in early years, and let's just see what an impact that would have.
I mean, I've spent my fair share in year one, and I'll tell you the answer to that. And it is because somebody puts these exams at the end of year 11 and year 13. And so slowly but surely, as it goes up, you are then narrowing what you can get, and your time becomes more and more pulled away. In early years, the assessment, you're not expecting those kids to do an exam at the end of the year. They are assessed, but they're assessed in a very clever, smart, curiosity-focused way. And to say, one of the things I miss about teaching the younger children is that you can have that, you can have fun, you can play, and you can say to yourself, well, actually, if this lesson doesn't go according to plan, I'll just do it again. But also, I think that's another thing about a lot of primary teachers. You are with those kids, so you have a little bit more flexibility in time. If you're lucky enough that you haven't got a really regimented curriculum, which I know some people do. And yeah, it's hard in secondary to create space.
Okay, and that's all valid. Go ahead.
Just before you move on to that, Shannon, we were talking about like many things there, but I watched.
I think she
Oh, of course. This is how it always goes. She has something profound and deep, and she's going to drop the mic. It's always those drop the mic moments.
Yeah.
And then
Am I back?
there she is.
Yes,
I knew it
you're
was
back.
coming.
Okay. I was actually continuing to talk, and then you guys were like, "Uh-oh," and I was like, "Uh-oh, what?" I'm still like mid-sentence, and I realized, oh, I'm about to lose connection. But that's what happens, guys, in this part of the world. Sometimes things like that happen, right? So let's see if I remember what I was going to say now. Oh yeah, this morning's session. So game-based learning. I know for a fact that all the people on this call are really big fans of game-based learning. So this morning I watched a Global GEG session. So shout out to our friends from Global GEG who may be watching in the chat. They put on a session on game-based learning and some really profound theoretical evidence coming from these education leaders in India. And just, do we even ever think about learning from other people around the world, right? Like, you know, I'm British, grew up in Canada. This is the lens, and I live here, and this is how my lens is adapting, right? But what are other people in other parts of the world learning? And this idea of walking through steps, and guess what? Empathy was right in there. Game-based learning creates empathy. When you're working through game-based courses, you guys need to go and watch the show. I'll drop that link in there as well. But when we gamify the learning, we allow students and learners to be able to empathize with different situations, however we've created the course, right, guys? So whether it's analyzing like colors, or how do you want the users to feel when they're playing your game? And actually they talked about in their session, like that they have that pause moment. So at certain parts of the game, they have to pause and talk about their feelings and talk about how they're working through getting to the next stage, for example. So it's not just always about getting, you know, the badge or the gold coin, although that really excited me when I was playing Super Mario Brothers when I was a kid. It's also about understanding the skills and the human skills that we're building through that process. So I just wanted to add that little point in there, that game-based learning is going to tackle or to hit on the points of all of the above, right? Critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, and extrinsic motivation to get them engaged, right? So I think it's important to think about.
No, I love that. And we just dropped into the chat a link to a wonderful, wonderful book about game-based learning by an incredible human being who's doing amazing things to change the world of education.
A bit slow there.
So check that out. Give James some love. Check out what he's doing. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers.
And I love that that gamified approach. I think that so many individuals, a lot of the time, I know in my world, they struggle to gamify beyond just those like check-ins or getting kids like, you know, interested, because they're so afraid of, you know, there's this idea in my world that like gamified learning, taking pieces and gamifying it, is First of all, it's one noted. It's like, let's do a quizzes or a Kahoot, which is fine. But I know that there's so much more out there. But then there's this idea that like, well, what if an administrator walks in during that time and sees my kids, loud and being vibrant and all these things. And we're trying to shift that and say, well, that is learning happening right before your eyes. But there is definitely that fear there. But I do think you're right, Georgina. I think that it definitely hits on all of those points, which then like kind of makes me wonder. So we've been talking about all these different aspects, and there's always going to be barriers, right? But we have to start somewhere, and some of us are further along than others, I suppose. But what can we do to help educators move towards like igniting these new skills? How do we start to get to a point where this becomes the norm across classrooms? Like, what would be first steps? Who wants to start that one?
I was giving an extra few seconds, but if no one's jumping, I'll pop in again. Otherwise, just stop me now before I start.
Go big.
Okay. All right. I think that I'm going to get to the educator in a second, but I think that it comes to a culture shift, right? And I think that everybody needs to buy into this idea that those skills are important. Nate just dropped active learning, right? If we're not being active in all parts of school life, how can we expect our educators to try and foster that with their learners? And how can we expect learners to want to foster those if it's not being modeled correctly? So I'm just going to give a shout out to start the conversation to the ISTE standards. And I think I dropped that in the chat, but I'll drop it again. On the ISTE website, where you can become an ISTE certified educator, there's something called essential conditions, and they talk about 14 critical elements. Oh, I'm still sharing my screen. Do you want to pop that up, Gary? And then they can see it as well. Awesome.
Yeah.
So in these essential conditions, and I'll make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see, they talk about 14 critical elements to leverage technology in education. And look at all of this. We need a shared vision. Imagine that, people working together as a team in a school, right? Technical support, empowered leaders. Who are the leaders we're empowering? They should be all the stakeholders. We need to plan for it. You need to get a focus group, just like all the people on this live stream. Your school can get a focus group of people together to say, right, let's map our skills. These are the skills that we see as important, which definitely could be creativity, critical thinking, curiosity, flexibility, everything we talked about. And how are we going to map those across the curriculum? So for example, at our school, we have like the learning objectives, that's fine, and curriculum planning for lessons, etc. But underneath the bottom, they're mapped against skills that we want our learners to be able to develop over the course of their time on their journey through our school. So what are the different skills they're building in different parts? Hopefully, I'm sure ideally, all of us on the call would hope that every lesson is able to tackle everything, right? But we know the reality is it's not always possible. But just take a look on here. Engage communities, that whole idea of global collaboration, equitable access, skilled personnel, policies that support. Check that out, the word support next to your policies. Everything needs a bigger vision. So am I saying that, this is totally the solution? Probably not, because everybody's personal ecosystem in their own school, in their own district, academy, country, etc., is going to be different. But these could be some of the ideas that might support you in getting started. Like, how do we start to think about fostering those digital skills? So I think that's really, really important. And the empowering of leaders, like, allow your groups, whether it's year 4s all together, or it's an entire phase or entire faculty or department or grade level, you could have like, skill of the week, and like, let's just have a drive on skill, instead of just having like book week, or instead of having like hero week, although those are all important. Everybody knows I love to read. Why not have a skills week? This week, the skill is, right? Next month, this is the skill. What are we going to do across our entire culture to build this skill this month? Let's have different creative ways to engage those skills. That's what I think.
I mean, about 12 years ago now, 12, 15 years ago, there there was an IT organization in the UK, and they had this week called Risk It. And basically the agreement was that you could take these risks, have fun, experiment, and SLT would give you free rein during that week. And what they discovered was the excitement, the interest, the fun actually made for some amazing lessons. Some things stuck, some things didn't, but the kids really bought into this, and you know, they were as feedback as possible. But then SLT also said, look, for this week, we're not going to come do walk-ins of the kind we normally do. We're going to celebrate and see what works, what doesn't work. And that was a really powerful thing. And I think it's one of those things that I would love to bring back. Just here's a week, take all the risks you can. Let's see if things work or don't. But kids love it. They love experiment. They love fun. I also noticed in the comments, people are saying, well, how do we do it? And people are saying parents are key, but you have the potential. If you're doing something right and your kids are loving it and those students are loving it, you're going to get the PR. I mean, I love it when parents come back to me and say lines that I said to those students. I'm like, we're sorted now. And, you know, I've been in my school for quite a long time now, but I remember at the beginning, I had to work really hard to persuade the students and the parents that computer science was something worthwhile. And it took a lot of effort and a lot of push and encouragement, gamification. All of those things were born out of necessity to get my subject back on an even keel and you know, to build a department. And I think that hard work, enthusiasm, experimentation comes through, and ultimately those kids will not only tell their parents, they will tell other teachers, and then you started a snowball. Yeah, that's it. Culture shift takes a lot of time.
I love that.
Yeah, no, that was spot on. I think that, you know, not only are we considering, you know, what we're doing just in our own practice, but really kind of making it a collaborative move towards a single vision that we all share, you know, and that's going to be what's most powerful. That was beautiful. Thanks, James. Another thing that really stuck out to me, Georgina, when you were talking about the essential conditions, was this idea that it does take everybody. It's a group effort, and it's not just a let's throw something out into the wind and hope that it sticks, right? I mean, there is risk taking involved where you are gonna, but what I see when I look at these 14 essential conditions is deliberate, like the deliberate nature of planning, and everybody gets an opportunity from all facets of the organization to add in and give insight, because it's that idea that, you know, we all have a perspective, we all have an approach, we all think we're doing the right thing, but sometimes we don't take the time to step back from whatever we're most passionate about and get that outside perspective, you know. And I was recently reading, or I'm reading right now, Fired Up Leadership by Dr. Frank, and he's in the chat with us, or was earlier. And a lot of what this one section is focusing on is this idea of listening. And I think that is a skill in and of itself. Like, a lot of us like to speak, we like to share, we have perspective, especially when we are passionate about something, you know, and our enthusiasm comes through. But listening is almost more important in the process of collaboration and communication and flexibility and leadership. And if we can't harness those active listening skills, you know, I think that is sometimes what leads to downfall. Welcome. But yeah, that's what leads to downfall. And I think that once we stop, take a step back, reflect, and constantly reflect and listen to all of our stakeholders, you know, it would be better for all. A fun segue to risk taking can be this short video with author Dan Brown, and based on how Aerosmith challenged each other as bandmates to take a risk. Nate, you're gonna have to go ahead and tag all of us. Drop that on Twitter and tag all of us so that we can go ahead and get on the same level as you, sir. Go ahead.
This actually makes me think of another teacher who's doing lots of stuff online. I'm not sure if you've seen his stuff, or it's Michael Matera. but he's doing a lot of sort of that risk taken in the classroom, that gamified, and it's well worth looking into it. He has a podcast as well called Well Played, and it's really his focus is how can I turn this classroom into something as exciting as playing a game, as playing a board game, as playing a video game, as playing, whilst covering everything I have to cover and more. And it's just, and he does it in such a well planned out way. I'm just looking now. I can't believe that he's only got 5,000 people subscribed to his channel, because what he's sharing is absolutely amazing. Like, definitely look into this guy. He is just an amazing educator, fired up, just one of those people who's just on fire, but also willing to say, I don't know this, let's find someone who knows better. When he does, you know, get into those areas that he doesn't have those skills, I think that leads back to what you were saying. Sort of, he's willing to say, okay, I don't know, tell me, I'll listen to you. This is something I do not know. Please just, you know, take the lead on this one. So yeah, definitely someone to follow as well.
I would like to offer a note of caution with gamification. And obviously those are people who read my book and know this. Do not try to gamify everything. If a student is getting pleasure, motivation, particularly from things like creativity, that's not what you gamify. And I just want to remind you that gamification is a tool to encourage people, to motivate people for things that they might like to do, but are not quite that keen to do it. Whereas if a student is enjoying drawing, I mean, there's plenty of times in my classroom, I just let the kids draw and they're playing with their iPads or their pencils or on paper or whatever it is, and they're just happy to do it. And you're like, well, I could gamify that, but as soon as I gamify that, I might take away that simple pleasure of drawing. And there are examples of that happening. And so, yeah, please, gamification is definitely a second level teacher skill. Get your basics in place, get your basics curriculum in place, and then start to think about, well, what are the kids not really motivated? That's where I want to gamify. The things that kids...
That's a very good point.
Yeah. That's it.
That's great. Thanks for that share, giving us from, you know, expert. Again, we dropped that link to James's book. You can go ahead and check it out, get some good insight. This guy right here. Guys, you're not on board. Gary, Ceti, where are you at?
I don't know. All right. Yeah, I think it's mixed anyway.
Yeah.
I was literally looking at the image and thinking, okay, my clock is over there, so I've got a point there.
Yeah. Always just do opposite my initial. That's how it rolls. She is. She gets pretty good at that. Okay, I kind of want to shift just a little bit. So we've talked a lot about those life skills, right? Creativity, collaboration, communication, and all of those leadership, initiative, etc., listening, talking, social skills. What about the literacy skills that exist? So if you look at any research online regarding 21st century skills, there's this idea of information literacy, you know, creating you know, students that are literate in information and media and technology, right? Learning how to look at information online and distinguish between what's fact, what's fiction, what's credible, what's not credible. How do I navigate these technology tools in a way that actually promotes learning and isn't just, you know, wasting time or, you know, whatever it may be. Talk to me about that. So these ideas of information, media, and technology literacy, how do we get started there? How do we start, like, say in my English class, right? We do a lot about credibility. We do a lot about biased literature online and learning how to distinguish between facts and fiction. Is that a humanities thing, or are we seeing that across classrooms?
I think it's across classrooms, I would really hope. But I think what you highlighted there about the author, the bias of that author is so important. Now, certain publications, it used to be quite easy because you could take one publication in the UK, they go one way, and the other publication will go the other way. With the web, it gets more mixed up, and people sometimes forget who wrote this, what's the authorship of this, and who is behind it. And I think that's really important. Even things that we might consider to be, well, internationally not so biased, like CNN. when you look at it, you realize that that's a very powerful organization behind it, who are left-wing leaning, shall we say, and they are not doing it not for profit. This is a corporate thing, and they have to appeal to their audience. And so you have to look at audience. And even when I look at things like academic papers, when I was doing my master's, the bias, the funding, the sourcing, everybody's got bias. And I think it's as soon as you understand that bias and that author, and you know where they're coming from, suddenly everything falls in place. But that takes time, and most adults can't do it. So getting kids to do it, I think, is a journey.
Yeah. What about some of you other panelists? What are you guys doing to really cultivate those skills in your students? Or what are some resources you could share with the educators that are listening?
So I know we're going to drop, or they may have already dropped, a bunch of different links in the chat. And so it's really, really important to understand. I like to always start with the footprint. I can't tell you, as an education and a professional learning trainer, provider, facilitator, one of the best things is seeing the look on people's face though, and they're like, whoa, that picture of me from like 20 years ago is still on the internet, or I looked like that when I was this age, and it's just really amazing. So I think the importance of understanding of our footprint is a really great place to start, because when you understand your footprint, then you can understand, wow, really how far something can go, right? You may have thought to yourself, oh, I posted that image once and now it's like showing up 30 years later. So I think that's really important. And I think digital citizenship across all the curriculum. So when I'm visiting with like the English department or the maths department, we're talking about, okay, if you're asking your students to create infographics, do they know where they can get royalty-free images? Do they know how to source? Do they know how to cite resources in Google Docs or in whatever other platform they're using? So all of the important things of digital citizenship, and that's just scratching the surface. Obviously, we have to make sure that it's cultivated across school culture. Same like for our marketing department, we can't ignore our admin. So like when I'm supporting marketing and saying like, hey, where did you get your image? Do you actually know, are you allowed to use that image or not? Things that may not be as relevant in this part of the world. Something that's really cool that's just come out is the fact checker. So I know we just put that on the slide, and it's actually just come up in a Google update, I think, right, Ceti, this month or just last month. So the Google fact check tools. Did you want to talk about it? Sorry, go ahead if you know. No? Gary does? Gary? Oh, okay, guys. So basically,
Go ahead,
you can pop in, if you open up the Google fact check tool, you can pop in like images, for example, or you can pop back in news artifacts or articles or ideas, and it will check to say if it is fact or not. So it's a really, really great way. Now, it's learning also because there's AI that's running behind it. So it's also learning as you input. So if you have a fact, and I'll be interesting to see where this goes, Ceti. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I'll be interesting to see how many users will verify a fact that's actually not a fact, and then how Google is going to respond to that. But you also can check, there's a link underneath the search bar called recent facts that are checked, and it will pull up like news reports and different media things. So it's a really, really cool tool. I just introduced it to my staff, so definitely take a look at that. But it's this kind of idea. I mean, I think that's actually quite decent from Google, right? They understand that actually everything that's going on the net, can it be verified? What is a verifiable source? So now they've upped their game, and they're providing us with this tool that we can start to use to support verifying our facts. So I think that's really big. We've dropped another couple of Twitter handles. So shout out to Adam Hill from Media by Example, who's also in your part of the world, guys, in Asia, doing some pretty epic things. So they show excellent examples and initiatives of how students can build media literacy, digital citizenship, etc. So definitely follow that awesome superstar. And also Common Sense Education. I like to take a mix of the Google Applied Digital Skills lessons, where students can learn self-paced at their own about digital footprints and different things like that, and then age appropriate pieces of lesson contents that come with resources and verified tools that are age appropriate are available off Common Sense Education. I would just like to, and then I'll pass the mic. Sorry, I realized I talked a lot on this episode. Obviously, a passionate point of contact for Georgina. I want to just say to be mindful and cautious when you're using any of these things that we're sharing on our Thursday PD session, because they are going to be different in each country. The GDPR versus COPA, FERPA, everything else that's out there based on your region. So just make sure when we are sharing resources that you guys have your instructional coach, your director of technology, your IT manager, the people that are supporting this, to make sure that those sources can be used in your region. Because, for example, I know Common Sense Education, they're very focused on North America, right, Shannon? But they've recently developed, released their UK curriculum portfolio as well. So they're growing and everybody's starting to become more global, which is really beautiful. But you still just need to make sure for your own region what is usable or not. Okay, I'm done, guys.
I was just going to say, I know for Malaysia in particular, it's a really good idea to check, and probably the Philippines and Thailand too, to check the actual ratings in our local countries, because there can be things that disinsensitivities. But yeah, most of the time they're in line with each other. But when I look at the Netflix ratings for the Malaysian show, I'm like, that's 18. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Or the other way around, because I've come across some things here where I'm shocked.
Well, Malaysia upgraded its ratings after, I think it was one of the Batman films, I think The Dark Knight. They gave it a U. And that is one scary film. A lot of parents came home very inclined and then said, you know what, maybe it's time we had an over 12 and...
But I agree. So many amazing things, though, in that, and thank you for that, Georgina. It's just it's brilliant, because I mean, who was it that left the comment that said, "I'm shocked"? I think it was Nathan who said he's shocked at how many educators are using images. Just Googled them. How many presentations are being copied and used? How many? We are not exactly setting a good example all the time, and I know many are trying, but it is so incredibly important. Digital citizenship should not be the ICT teacher's job. Should not just be for computer science. It should not just be for tech. It is as important as politely greeting someone in the morning. It is the same thing. It is just part of everyday life now, and for all these companies to really push that and have that open conversation about it, and then that ties in with the whole privacy thing and all these different countries having their GDPR, PDPA, all the different regulation, and the companies openly discussing privacy now, talking about changes. Google talking about the whole cookie versus the flock thing. And it's just, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we're having that conversation. And I think as educators, we should also have that conversation in our class. For example, when you're doing something with your students and you've got an image, just briefly mention, oh yeah, by the way, I got this image there. If you ever, if you're working on your project, you do realize that you've got these amazing sites here where you can get your images from. You've got some amazing stock photography. And I think it's just, it has to become part of our everyday language almost, the way we talk about like the bias as well. Just like, okay, well, we've got this article. Now, do keep in mind, not everyone is of this opinion. Some people think this way and this. And it's just don't just blatantly accept things for facts and realize that we all have bias. Yes, absolutely. And we all make mistakes. Absolutely. And the more we talk about those, then maybe we'll make less.
I mean, that's the goal, right? And really great insights, guys. And I appreciate all the shares, and I looking in the chat, a lot of people appreciate it too and are agreeing with you guys wholeheartedly. So it is coming to the hour, and I do want to be mindful of our hour. But I do want to do a quick little whip around question, quick, okay? And you can show something if you need to, but so we've been talking a lot about these 21st century skills. We're talking about how important they are as we move forward in education. So in an effort to enhance the teaching of these 21st century skills across global education, what is something you as a practitioner right now are going to commit to put in place or share or whatever this month? We'll start with, why not start with Georgina, since we always do? Let's see it.
Yeah.
Okay, can you throw it on the screen, Gary? I shared it in already. Okay, so you guys all know I'm really a massive creativity fiend, addict, celebrator, all of the above. Teach Creativity with Adobe and Khan Academy are a brand new, well, they've been partnered for a little bit. These are some examples of science and Adobe with Khan that you can do with lessons plans ready to go, science, engineering, STEM, creativity, etc. But now there's something really big that just got released, I think yesterday or the day before. So we've dropped the blog in the link, and it is a partnership between Adobe and Khan Academy on teaching creativity specifically. So there's loads of links in there to go through and understand why. There's a little video explaining their partnership, which I'm so excited about. So definitely take a look at that. There's also hundreds of free lesson plans and projects and self-paced learning. But what's really great that I'm going to share with my staff also is that there's this brand new Adobe course for educators. So it's a free 20-hour self-paced course that you can take here, and it's all linked into the blog that we've shared in the links. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on is the curiosity piece and the creativity piece. So coming up to the end of the school year, my school, we're going to finish off on online learning, and the students are tired and they really need something to fire up and ignite their learning. So I think this is going to be a great chance for educators to do their self-paced PD and then go and ignite everything that they're learning from this course with their students. So I'm really excited to share this on Sunday on our first day back. And for those viewers that are listening in the chat, check that out. They're giving away until May 17th free a chance to win a free virtual drop-in from Sal Khan himself from Khan Academy, as well as win a creativity kit. So hopefully that's some good news from Georgina on the dropout of the session today.
I love that. I love that. All right, let's go ahead and quick whip. We're almost there. Ceti, what about you? What's something you're going to commit to?
Yeah, for me, it's really just reaching out to those. I mean, I try to connect online to as many educators as possible, and it's trying to reach groups that I'm not as connected to as possible. Like for example, I have a lot of sort of people in sort of North America and then Europe, but I want to connect more with educators that are not necessarily within the international schools, that are not working within those areas of education where I'm very comfortable. I know sort of what I'm doing, but I want to connect more with your people that are working in those underfunded schools that are really struggling, and what are their biggest concerns, and then just connecting more with people that are working in those schools. That is really something I've been trying to do for these past few months. I'm really going to keep pushing that because I think that's so important.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. James, what about you?
Really, I want to continue to help SEN and EAL kids, and I think it's really proven to me today that there are tools out there and we can really help teachers, and sometimes it's the simpler stuff that's important. So this tool here just helps you with understanding the complexities of language and trying to make it simple. So I'm trying to reach out to as many people as possible. I just taught how many was it, Gary? How many did we teach today? 106 teachers today on Zoom, and they told me an hour wasn't long enough, and I was like, no, it's enough. That's it. You're out of here. So yeah, we're doing that, and as I say, we're just trying to get the message out that how to support EAL, how to pre-teach vocabulary and that kind of stuff. And I've realized, going back to my EAL roots in some ways, and using obviously my computer science skills to actually automate the process quite a lot. And just try and reach out there and help people.
Yeah, awesome. Love that. And then we will round it out with Gary.
Okay, I'm planning to, this will be my commitment now. I was thinking of teaching coding to everyone here in the Philippines, because they always think that coding is a technical subject, but it can be integrated in any subject, in any discipline, in any level. The thing is, we have to be creative in how to introduce coding to kids. So that is what I'm planning to do. And so for those who are in the Philippines, you wait for my post. So to help Philippine education.
Love that. And a huge shout out before we round out to Eric, who just joined us in the chat. Happy birthday to
Woohoo!
you.
Happy birthday,
Eric.
One of our
Birthday.
Thursday PD
Happy
teammates.
birthday!
So glad you were able to join us. Well, that's that, guys. We are so glad you joined us this morning, afternoon, evening, however, and wherever you're tuning in from. That's all our thoughts, not all, but a lot of thoughts on 21st century skills. And we hope that you will take it and transform education wherever you are. Join us next month, first Thursday of the month. We will be talking all things introduction to coding. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye for now.